when we see this, we're like, oh yes, this is not a real man, representation of beauty. No, we just think his name has been lost. We don't know what his name is. So women have, there's this problem, right? Why isn't this just, Mrs. Smith in Italy, right? But why isn't this just someone's name? We don't know, right? And it also gets complicated by things like Raphael's Fornarina, which is again an image that we speculated that this is Raphael's mistress, right? The Fornarina means the baker's daughter, right? And in fact, there's a lot of writing about Raphael's dalliances with the baker's daughter, right? And clearly, again, an ideal beauty. But the thing that has really attracted attention is the fact he signs her, stamps her, right? Raphael Urbina, so he's from Urbino, right? So I made this. This is mine, right? And so that either means possession of the woman or possession of art as his creation, right? Or it means both. But again, we're seeing a lot of some problems coming up with images of women and how it gets really complicated and how portraiture starts to not really have a great idea about identity and how we should understand it. So, which brings me to, what do you do if you are a real woman in the Renaissance and you want to show your intellectual abilities and your achievements? Art is made almost exclusively for men, by men. Is it possible to be more than an object of beauty? Is it possible to be more than sort of this ideal that we've seen? Anyone know who this is? Don't say anything yet. Go on. What do we see? We've got an image of a woman that looks really different than what we've seen. Right? What's different? I was going to say, a much more relatable neck. Okay? So she's got a book, right? We've seen some books already, but again, this idea of a book maybe about hiding, but also maybe learning, which is reading a book. What else do we know? Yeah. She has these huge eyes. And I gotta tell you, in every book she's got these huge eyes. So either maybe that it's like a genetic trait that she just has really big eyes, or think about eyes like the window to the soul, but also about maybe it's like intellectual capacity. Yeah, she always has those really big eyes. Okay? What about what she's wearing? She's not fancy. Right. Black. Very restrained. What's she wearing in her hair? Nothing, just really simply pulled back. We don't see any jewels. We don't see a fancy costume. We don't see a lot of those markers, or any of those markers that we've seen. So, anyone know who this is? Who is it? It is. This is Sophonisba and Grisola. So I thought it would be interesting to end and think about, well, what if you're a woman artist that wants to do a portrait of yourself? How do you deal with this entire opus of female portraits that has either made you this object, or this almost still-like object, or they've made you the creation of the powerful male artist? How do you kind of escape that trap of beauty and make it more about your accomplishment and your intellect, right? So, here in fact, she does, and that's always number one assignment is an unknown because it's too easy to figure out who it is, right? Because she writes Sophonisba and Grisola, and then she writes, I made this, right? And signs it, okay? Now, the other thing that she said is virgin. And the best way to think about this is, again, chastity was a prized virtue for women, but it could also be a power position. Who can we think of that had a very powerful position that used virgin as a big part of her ruling identity? You familiar with Elizabeth I? Right? And so that idea of then taking something that was expected of women or thought to be so great and making it something empowering, right? And she does this and she finds it over and over and over again, even long after she's married, right? Because it's not really about virginity, right, in the sort of the classical sense that we think about it. So what we also see is she'll do, she's reading a book, right? Or here we see her playing piano, which is, again, an accomplishment. It's considered to be a feminine accomplishment. But we see, she's active. She's doing something. She's trying not to just be an object. She's trying to be a subject. And we see her, again, very buttoned up. And the other thing is she's playing the virginal. right? And we see also with her other compatriots, someone like Lavinia Fontana, who's also painting about at the same time, again playing the virginals, and we know she did not play. And again, also signing Virgo, and she was married. So we know this whole Virgo thing doesn't really have to do with the state of their wombs, right? Right? And we then also will see Sophonisba actually painting, right? She's actually showing what she can do. So, well, again, we're seeing it's a totally new idea of woman, as a creative individual. And in fact, here, right, she's painting the Virgin and Child. So she's kind of doing, it's a great little play that she does. So what is she showing us she can do? I can paint religious subjects. I can paint portraits, because look, you're looking at me painting something, right? But she's also doing a nice little trick, which is St. Luke, patron saint of artists, paints the original Virgin and Child, allegedly from the Virgin and Child. So what's she doing? She's showing herself as St. Luke, right? So again, putting herself in this very powerful, accomplished position. Now, I want to end with one of my favorite paintings by Sophonisba, which some of you may be familiar. Has anyone ever seen this before? Familiar with it? Yeah. So here is Sophonisba doing something kind of interesting, right? And their pages just go. That it has been argued that here she is really announcing that she understands, right, this whole object-subject issue for women, and she's making it actually the subject of this painting, right? Because what do we see? We actually see Sophonisba here in the center, but she's being painted by Bernardino Campi, who was her instructor, right? But at the time it gets painted, she hadn't been his pupil for years, right? And we also need to notice, I know it's a little bit dark, it's hard to see. This is an easel, you can see, so it's an easel, so this is a painting, and it's kind of standing high corner to the easel. So, who is the most prominent individual in this? She's in the center, she's up higher, right? Because all of a sudden we start thinking, oh, this is sort of strange. Is this about him creating her? Because, in fact, an artist, right around the time this was made, sort of congratulated Campi on your creation, Sophonisba. And is this about her getting a little wind of that and not being too pleased about being a creation of some artist who she hadn't been training with for years, right? So we also see, show some fun little things. So here he's, painting her. He's using a maul stick, which was considered to be sort of a prop to help you paint. So she's kind of saying like, oh, he's a little help, huh? Right? And if you look at this, she's larger, she's up top, but what one looks more lifelike and realistic? Who looks more like an individual? Who looks more like the product of an accomplished painter? You can argue that Campi looks more realistic. So what do we got here? Well, if Campi's painting this and Sophonisba's painting this, who is kind of coming out on top, right? Look, I can do better than you can do. Look, you're trying to paint me, you're doing a horrible job. I can paint you better, right? So we can have Sophonisba painting her instructor, painting her, all of these levels sort of collapsing onto it. And again, insisting on being the active subject, right? Being the one who is, more imposing and more talented, right? So, to bring it all around to the end, right? So, acknowledging and challenging, right, these ideas of the Renaissance artist creating beautiful women to illustrate his talent, right? So now Sophonisba's kind of playing with that, especially in the last one where she's creating a woman and a man, creating a woman, right? And she's doing all of that. So in Sophonisba, we have someone who understood the traps of beauty and succeeded in being something more than an object of beauty, than an idealized figure that again stood in for artist creation, and was instead someone who was creative and intellectual and a force to be reckoned with. Thank you.